Drew, let's jump to Penn State now, the number 12 ranked recruiting class in the country, 20 commitments under James Franklin, a class last year already that finished number 6, paying huge dividends in this year in the 2022 season, led by Nicholas Singleton, the breakout freshman, and Katron Allen as well, the two-headed monster that Penn State has in that backfield. But Drew, me and you, before we got on this show, we talked about how impressed we are with the Nittany Lions in the 2023 cycle. What are your initial impressions of this group?
I think they're just stacking another great class behind that 2022 group you mentioned. And I was at Auburn on Saturday. Keon Lee goes down with an injury. I turned to everyone. I said, don't worry. They got another staple of running backs coming. Obviously, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen. When I look at Penn State in this group in 2023, I think it's more of the same and of what we liked from the year prior. I think James Franklin and his staff are doing a good job of getting prospects with a higher floor, but ones that still have a higher ceiling. Everyone in this class seems to have some type of trait, whether that be speed, whether that be measurables, multi-sport data, plays on both sides of the ball. I don't see a take in that class where I'm really scratching my head. And I think that's kind of the name of the game. Yes, the rules have been, leaned up a little bit when it comes to counters and what you can do with your 85 scholarships, but you can't miss. And I don't think Penn State's really going to miss with any of these guys. And I think a lot of them are going to have a chance to play early on. I also really like what Penn State is doing in the secondary. Manny Diaz, the new defensive coordinator, who knows how long he's going to be there. I thought his defense looked awesome against Auburn on Saturday. It's an aggressive front, but that defensive backfield, King Mack, Elliott Washington, those are both 10-6 guys in the 100-meter dash. Conrad Hussey, he's a 10-9 guy. And then Dakari Nelson, he's a big 6'3 guy that can get from sideline to sideline and play some wide receiver on Friday nights. To me, these are guys that can cover in the back end and allow that pass rush to get home. So I really like what they're doing on defense. I like just the type of kid that they've identified in general. I think Penn State knows who they are at this stage, and that's exciting for James Franklin and co.
You said it right there, Andrew. You took the words right out of my mouth. But they know who they are. They know who their identity is. And you look at Penn State, 6 of the 20 commitments that they have in this class are top 247 commits. Those are the guys that we typically talk about. But to me, studying this class, it was the 14 other guys that I came away impressed with the most. I think their ability in the identification and evaluation process has been excellent. We've seen that last year with their number 6 ranked recruiting class and some of the guys that they brought in. That's paying dividends already with some of the freshmen making an impact. And I think we're going to see that again in 2023. But if there was a position group that has stood out to me, it's been the offensive line. You talk about the number 1 interior prospect in the country on the offensive line. That's Alex Burkmeyer from the state of Virginia, and a guy we're going to talk about a little bit more, but a decorated wrestling background, a guy that's played some tackle. He can play some guard. I think this is going to be a guy that fits exactly what Penn State wants to do up front. But the guy right behind him, Drew, in terms of the rankings, and I don't think it might stay that way for very long, Javen Williams, another very established prospect in terms of the track and field background, state champion, and the shot in the disc. And if you don't really understand how that correlates, that's more about functional strength and power from the lower body to the upper half as well. And he is a very powerful player, but what stands out the most about him is his athleticism. You see him in space at the second level. I think this is a guy that can play tackle or guard. We're going to get into some NFL player comps here, but I love Javen Williams. And there's another guy on this offensive line from the state of Pennsylvania, Anthony Dunca as well. Another big guy, the size, athleticism, a lot of clay there, studying him earlier today. I think that's going to be a guy that's probably going to move inside at the next level. But you look at Penn State and what they're building on that offensive line. I think that is something when you look at the Big Ten championship, you look at some of those games in late November, December. I think Penn State has a really good idea of what they're trying to accomplish and control the line of scrimmage. And when you got backs like Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, some of the talent that they got coming in, London Montgomery, another guy that we really like, and not to mention Drew Aller going to be the guy running the show, as we presume. I mean, there is a lot to like about Penn State. But Drew, let's get into the nitty gritty, the NFL comps. I think one of our favorite segments when we do, when we break down teams' recruiting classes. And let's start with a couple of headliners. We're going to break down 5 guys here, but let's start with Alex Burkmeyer. My comp for him it's a Michigan comp, and forgive me, Nittany Lions fans, but obviously I spent some time there at Michigan. Ben Bredeson, a guy with the New York Giants, was drafted in 2020, a fourth-round draft pick of the Baltimore Ravens, and this was one I kind of struggled with, it self-admittedly. But just going back to Birkmeyer, man, I think this is a guy who's tough, he's physical, he's nasty, and he's a better athlete than people think. But Ben Bredeson, my comp for him, Drew.
It's funny, Cooper, because I kept kind of circling back on him. I mean, you go through the NFL list, you're trying to find a guy, and Ben Bredeson worked. I honestly spent like 20 minutes on this player comp. I finally settled down Ben Powers, who's a former lineman out of Oklahoma, plays for the Baltimore Ravens right now, starts up front, blocks for Lamar Jackson. And the reason why is because Ben was also a decorated wrestler. And Birchmeier, he's a two-time state champ. We'll see if he wins a third state title or if he goes ahead and enrolls early. But, the O-line comps are hard. I think when I see Birchmeier, I think he's very technically sound. He's a guy that, it wouldn't surprise me if he was going to a Michigan or he was going to a Notre Dame. That's the type of guys they get. So I love your comp. I love this player. And the next one is someone that me and you are super excited about. We were just on a rankings call, and I think you tossed out this idea. So I'm gonna allow you to take it away here. But the next guy we both really, really like.
Yeah, that's Javen Williams. And I think when you look at Alex Birkmeyer and you look at Javen Williams, Penn State now potentially has the possibility to have two offensive linemen commitments in the top 32. That's what we think of Javen Williams. And I got to give a shout out to Gabe Brooks. He's been on top of this one for a while. But Javen Williams, I talked about his decorated track and field background, but I love the athleticism. The pro comp for me is Alex Leatherwood, former first-round draft pick of the Las Vegas Raiders, gets cut this past year. But more if you look at what Alex Leatherwood did at the University of Alabama, started 4 years there, was a guy that played a little bit of guard, played some tackle. And I look at Javen Williams in the situation that he's in right now, very versatile, a guy that's also playing both positions. I think he can play anywhere on the offensive line. I really like his upside inside, but I think he's going to be able to play tackle at the next level. He's in a more run prominent style of offense. So I think we've seen that skill set exposed to us at a high level. I think we need to see more of him in pass protection, but this is certainly a guy with all the physical tools and the capability to be a early day 1, day 2 NFL draft pick.
I agree, man. I'm a huge fan of him, and I don't know how many of those clips were from his senior season. He just posted a 4-game highlight cut on Huddle. If you haven't seen that, check it out. He is nasty, finishing off blocks, one of the best run blockers, I think, in the class of 2023. And he's a guy that I think should be able to come in and play relatively early. My comp for him was Laken Tomlinson, former first-round pick out of Duke. Again, a mauler up front, a guy that's going to put his face mask on someone and drive someone into the dirt. Lincoln now with the New York Jets. So we really like him. It'll be interesting to see where he finishes. But those two offensive linemen, man, if you're Drew Aller, if you're Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, you got to feel good about the future of that line of scrimmage based upon what we have seen thus far here out of Birchmeier and Williams as seniors.
All right, Drew, I'm looking at your next player comp, and it puts a big smile on my face because it's a guy that I love. But you have King Mack compared to Buda Baker, and a guy that, we were very familiar with at the University of Washington, flies around, and one of the best playmakers on the back end in the NFL. Tell us what you love about King Mack.
I know this is a little ridiculous comparing King Mack to essentially one of the top safeties in the NFL, but having been around King Mack and seen him and his size, he's not the biggest individual, but I call him a modern day 5-tool center fielder in your secondary. This is a guy that was a 400-meter state champ in the state of Florida. He can get sideline to sideline, and while he might be small, he packs a powerful punch. And just like Buda Baker, I think he's going to be able to be a guy that is going to be able to put pressure off the edge and get after a quarterback. I also think he's going to be able to wrangle some of these Big Ten running backs in the open field. He was a member of my freaks list. I'm a huge fan of King Mack. I think it's a great evaluation for Manny Diaz and the rest of that defensive staff. And I know, again, Buda Baker, that's a huge lofty comparison, but I think if you're looking for an example of play style and someone with the same measurables, I think Buda Baker absolutely works for King Mack. And Cooper, were you at Washington when Buda Baker was there? Or are you rolling your eyes at this one?
No, I'm not rolling my eyes at all. I mean, when you look at King Mack, I think you said it, a 5-tool player, and I think that's what really makes Buda Baker's special is a guy that's so versatile. You can play him close to the line of scrimmage. You can play him on the deep hash. You can play the deep post as well. He's so physical. He's a really good pass rush specialist as well from that third level. And you look at King Mack, that's so much of what he does. We talked about the verified speed and athleticism. This is one of the more versatile and heady players in the secondary of any prospect in the country. So I love what Penn State is doing in the secondary. You talked about it, Drew. I mean, and he's going to be paired with Conrad Hussey, a guy that he's very familiar with, and his teammate at St. Thomas Aquinas. That's not even mentioning Elliott Washington as well. So the teeth of this Penn State recruiting class is certainly coming in the secondary. That's something that they've built an identity on since Manny Diaz has been there. He's doing a really good job in this cycle. But mine, for me, was Richard LeCounte, and a guy that got drafted in the 5th round by the university, out of the University of Georgia by the Cleveland Browns, was kind of a guy that was a really highly ranked player coming out. But the versatility was one thing that really stuck out to me. And if you got a guy that can play the deep third of the field, be your center fielder, kind of be the guy in the middle that makes things go, and then can come up to the line of scrimmage and be a factor in the run game, you got it all right there. So I expect big things for King Mack. He has shot up the board, Drew, since you put him on the radar, but love that kid. Love that get for Penn State. But Drew, another guy, another riser, there's a theme here. That's top 247 linebacker Tony Rojas, and Brian Doan, our recruiting analyst who covers the state of Virginia, put Tony Rojas on our radar. We love the speed athleticism combination. We had a little bit of concern about the size. I don't believe that's a question mark anymore. There's a lot of love, especially behind the scenes at 24/7 Sports, for Tony Rojas. Drew, who does he remind you of?
Well, I mentioned the freaks list, and Tony Rojas might be one of the biggest snubs out there. He's got a sports car in his Twitter bio, I like a Ferrari or something like that, and that's because he plays super fast. He can also dunk the basketball. I compared him to Drew Tranquill, the former Notre Dame safety / linebacker, because I think Tony's kind of the same thing. He's kind of in between a hybrid, and I know the hybrid term has diminished more and more. You know, it's a positionless defense at some levels. I think he's a guy that's going to be able to fly around in the Big Ten. He's going to be able to run with running backs. He's going to be able to cover wide receivers if he needs to. And he just reminds me of what Drew Tranquill did. Tranquill was also a guy who made plays on offense coming out of high school. So I like this get for Penn State. I like this get for Manny Diaz. You know, when Manny was at Miami, he struggled to find smart, fast linebackers that could play sideline to sideline. Then he gets to Penn State, and bam, right away he's got Tony Rojas committed. So I like this take. Who do you comp him to, Cooper?
I comped him to Jabril Cox, who came out of LSU. He started his career at North Dakota State, transferred to LSU, and then got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys, and a guy that, you know, had a lot of versatility. You can play him off the edge, you can play him outside as well. And when I look at Manny Diaz's defense, I think Tony Rojas is exactly what you're looking for at the will linebacker position. He's got some pass rushing ability off the edge. He can play in space. He is kind of the modern sized NFL linebacker. And for Penn State, who likes to play with heavy defensive back type of personnel, whether that's nickel or dime, I think Tony Rojas is going to be a guy that's certainly going to benefit there. But Drew, we just got off another rankings call, and we talked a lot about Penn State. You look at some of the guys that we've already talked about, Javen Williams, King Mack, Tony Rojas, on their way to having very good senior seasons. Wouldn't be surprised if a couple of these guys are moving up in the rankings. But Drew, maybe the guy that we are just trying to figure out the most, and that is Tamir Robinson, top 247 edge defender, the number 141 player in the country, number 16 edge. And Drew, I comped him to Randy Gregory. And when you watch Tamir Robinson, you're trying to figure him out. There's a lack of information in terms of the verified athleticism and the verified speed. And then you see this guy, 6'4", 225 pounds, that long frame. He has a basketball background. He plays off the edge. He'll play off ball as well. He'll play safety, and he'll look very natural doing it. So in terms of the ceiling on a guy like Tamir Robinson and the track record that Penn State has developing these type of edge rushers who are more clay than production coming in, Tamir Robinson, to me, would be the type of guy that 3 to 4 years from now, we got him inside the top 150, but he's playing his way in a day 1 or day 2 NFL draft pick.
Well, I think with Robinson, there's two things you got to note. Number one, he's missed some time with an MCL, ACL injury. He's rehabbing. Brian Doan, our analyst, said today on that call that he thinks Tamir's going to play at some point this season. So that's why it's been hard to get data on him. Number two, he might have the longest legs in the class of 2023. Look at a photo of him. He's just all legs, and he can cover a ton of ground. I struggled with this comp so hard. I mean, is he an edge rusher? Is he a safety? Is he a box player? I really don't know, but I like him. And Cooper, I'm going to use a word that I hate. Super intriguing, just because I don't know enough about him. I comped him to Cam Brown, the former Penn State linebacker who's now with the New York Giants. I think if he does stay in an off-ball linebacker role, that's the closest thing I could find to him at the NFL level. Obviously, Cam's a 6'5" kid. I don't think Robinson's that big, but he's got a bright future, and interested to see what happens once he gets in that weight room and gets a little more explosive and is eating at a training table, because I think he's got a super, super high ceiling.
There you have it for the headliners in the class, 5 guys that we break down in every class of the MVP team that we select week by week. But Drew, now it's time for some guys that should be getting a little bit more love. Maybe they're not the most mainstream names in the class. Maybe they're not the most talked about guys in the class. But guys that now that we've done the dirty work, we've taken a look under the hood, we've seen, hey, maybe there's some guys here in this Penn State class that should be getting a little bit more credit than we, the national media, are giving them. Drew, who do you want to start out with?
Let's start with these 2 tight ends, Joey Schafler, Andrew Rapellia. Hopefully I'm getting that right. I know producer Jesse's going to kill me for messing that name up. But look, Penn State, they know a thing or two about tight ends. Mike Gesicki, we saw him hitting the gritty on Sunday for the Miami Dolphins. Maybe a little bit too long. Pat Freiermuth, he's now in the NFL. I wouldn't be surprised if either one of these tight ends one day was playing on Sundays. I mean, they are big, 6'5", 225-pound functional athletes with two-way snaps, kind of tucked away in the Northeast, but I like those 2. And then how about the quarterback, Jackson Smolik, Elite 11 finalist, was previously committed to Tulane. Penn State loses a commitment from Marcus Stokes, who flips to Florida in the summer. That doesn't take them that long to get Jackson in the boat. And I like this kid. I know Greg Biggins, who was out at the Elite 11 finals. He's kind of our quarterback whisperer, our quarterback guru. He loved Jackson's release. He's struggling a little bit early on here in his senior season, but I liked what I saw when he was a junior. Dealt with a broken collarbone, but I think this is the perfect guy to take after Drew Aller, someone that's not going to be expecting to be on the field right away, but he can provide some depth. So I don't think we're talking about him enough on a national scale. Again, this is a guy that went to the Elite 11 finals where there's 24 other quarterbacks and made that Elite 11. So nice find there for James Franklin and his offensive staff.
Smolik, more of a traditional drop back passer. And listen, I like Marcus Stokes a lot. I think Smolik might be a better fit for what James Franklin wants to do offensively. And Drew, we're going to talk about receivers here in a second. But the one guy that after watching this morning that kind of opened my eyes was Carmelo Taylor, committed to Penn State, and right now a guy that we like a lot, but a sub 1,100 meter, a 10.56 100 meter. You watch that on tape. This is a guy that moves exceptionally well, can change gears, can get to top speed quickly. I think he's going to need some polish at the next level, but in terms of his ability to come in and develop and make an impact, speed is going to be what gets you on the field early. And Carmelo Taylor does not like that, or lack that, excuse me. So I like a lot what Carmelo Taylor is going to bring to the fold, along with Ejani Shakir in that receiver room. And I think that's going to be a guy that we can see maybe 2 years from now that's going to have more of an impact than what we initially thought. But Drew, biggest question marks in this class, and this is a class that once you study it, I know me and you really like a lot. So this was kind of tough for us to find something to nitpick here. But what are you going with?
I'm going to go offensive line. I don't think they're done at that position. We just talked up that group, but we think they're probably more interior players. I know they only took 2 offensive tackles last year, and just reading Lions 247, just trying to get a pulse for the situation. It seems like Penn State's going to maybe big game hunt for a tackle that shakes free, shakes some trees, sees what falls out. So if anything, if there's any complaint in this class, it's how do they figure out what to do on the perimeter of that offensive line? Obviously, we feel good about what they have on the inside. And I think both, Javon Williams, I think maybe he could be a swing tackle if needed. But for me, I just think it's the offensive tackle.
I just heaped a lot of praise on Carmelo Taylor, but I'm going to say game-changing receiver. And I think, Drew, obviously, people know what we think of Drew Aller. I think the early returns of what we've seen of him in a very small, limited sample size show the promise of him and his potential at Penn State. I think you got to do your best to continue to add a lot of weapons around him to give him the full arsenal of what he needs to be successful. Like I said, I like some of the pieces they got coming in, but who is going to be the guy for him at State College? And certainly the future looking bright for Penn State. And Drew, what is the perfect finish for you? If there's one or two guys out there that Penn State is still in the mix for, who would you want to, I guess, throw your name in the hat for?
How about Rodney Gallagher, top 247 wide receiver? You know, James Franklin saw him play out on the road a few weeks ago. He's currently committed to West Virginia. Neil Brown, his seat's getting warmer. What happens there if he were to come back on the market? I think he's a guy, he's a dynamic basketball player. He can score on the hardwood, get to the rim, but he can also make plays in the open field on Friday night. So I think he would be a luxury for Penn State, but that's a guy I got my eye on. What about you, Cooper?
I like Edwin Joseph, a guy we talked about earlier. They're two-way guys. You're going to play defensive back. Is he going to play receiver? These are the type of guys that we say, just get them in the building. We'll figure it out later. But studying Edwin Joseph this week is certainly a guy that I like, and I think he can change that receiver room at Penn State, and that's what I just got done talking about. So I like Edwin Joseph a lot. That battle is a big one, but you talk about the success that Penn State has had in the state of Florida this year. If he plays defensive back, he would be the 7th defensive back of this class out of 21 commitments. That would be a third of their class, Drew, as DBs. But Drew, that does it for Penn State. Listen, my final thoughts on Penn State, and Drew, I'll let you get to yours. I like this class a lot. It might be sitting at number 12, and I'm telling you, if you at home are a Penn State fan and you're getting wrapped up in 4 stars and how many guys we're going to have finished in the top 100, don't. This staff has done a tremendous job making sure they've identified and evaluated the right players for this program. I really love the job that James Franklin has done this cycle.
What I like about this class is it's all in place and it feels like it's almost done. And they're in position now to chase after Rodney Gallagher. They're in position to go after a late bloomer like Edwin Joseph, who might end up being better than what some of the guys they already have committed. So I like that. And the final thing I'll say is James Franklin's doing a very nice job in the transfer portal. Sure, he's not wearing a sweater at a press conference saying transfer to State College, but he has figured out the free agency model, and he's getting some success. Chop Robinson, the pass rusher that came over from Maryland, he looks great early on. The wide receiver, Mitchell Tinsley, he came from Western Kentucky. He's made a bunch of plays early on in the season. So I want to see what Penn State does when we get to December and January. What is the icing on the top for this class when it comes to looking at talent acquisition as a whole? Remember, college football these days, it's just not the high school recruiting class. You also got that transfer portal out there, and that's really free agency. So I think James Franklin has the right idea with that. Take developmental guys with high upside from the high school ranks, and then go and get some difference makers in the transfer portal.
It's a really good point on the transfer portal. I think they've been more selective there, as producer Jesse reminded us of the job that they've done in the transfer portal so far. But I'd be remiss. One more guy I want to mention, Tyreek Blanding, the defensive lineman out of New York. Really like him. Sub 6'2" guy, very active, very versatile, explosive. Drew, I just had to get that in because I have a feeling we'll be watching this maybe a year or two from now. And it's like, how did we not bring this guy up? So that is it on Penn State.